The European Parliament is a step closer to scrapping the monthly trek from Brussels to here in Strasbourg. The institution's two-seat system, as defined in EU treaties, has long been held as an example of excessive spending during times of austerity across the EU. An overwhelming majority of ministers, though, have voted in favor of change, but it may not come easy. For many members of the European Parliament, putting an end to the so-called traveling circus of civil servants and journalists making their way to Strasbourg every month is an easy call, despite the fact that EU treaties stipulate Parliament shall sit in Strasbourg during 12 sessions a year. The criticisms are many. First of all, there's cost. MEPs say keeping the Strasbourg seat costs 150 million euros a year, including the transport of entire MEP offices and their staff. Never mind maintenance costs of keeping the building up and running while it sits empty.
At a time of austerity at home, when national governments are making painful spending cuts, how can we justify this expenditure? Why, as we lecture our constituents on reducing their CO2 emissions, do we emit 19,000 tonnes of the stuff every year commuting between Brussels and Strasbourg?
The French border city is also criticized for having poor transport links to the rest of Europe. But despite all the discomfort, the European Parliament doesn't currently have the power to decide where it sits. Critics of the single-seat campaign say it shouldn't.
The seat of the Parliament, always, or nearly always, in the main capital city of the country, is always coming from the history, from a long story, kind of political agreement, then on a special period, for instance, quite recently in Germany after the German reunification. But it's not the Parliament itself on its own that can decide. And I don't think why the members of the European Parliament, even if I believe in the Parliament, of course, and in the importance of this House, I don't think that the European Parliament is allowed to demand a special right and a right of self-organization. No, it doesn't exist.
Among other arguments to keep the multi-capital arrangement of the European Parliament are the jobs and businesses the institutions generate when Parliament comes to town. After all, for the European Parliament, the story did start in Strasbourg.
Then came Brussels, then came new buildings, new expenses for the new plenary room in Brussels, but it came after.
Another red flag is that treaty change might prove difficult, that MEPs say that it's only a matter of time before the opportunity comes.
Now, we know that France and Germany and other Eurozone states will want to make some constitutional changes. And therefore, when they come to the Parliament with those changes, we will talk to them and we will say, as part of that package, we expect our single-seat change to be there. So it is possible. My guess is it'll take about 5 years.
Standing in the way of scrapping the European Parliament's second headquarters here in Strasbourg is its host country, France, as well as Germany. All sorts of petitions and political lobbying are attempting to sway the French and German governments to give the Parliament the power to decide where it wants to sit. And that pressure is only set to climb. Sandra Gatman for JN1 at the European Parliament in Strasbourg.